call this Monday, September 11th, meeting of the York York County Planning Commission meeting to order. Before we get started, let's please observe a moment of silence as it is September 11th in honor of those who lost their lives during the terrorist attacks. Thank you. Moving on, are there any changes to the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
A second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Moving on to minutes from last week, or I'm sorry, last month. Any questions or corrections? Seeing no questions or corrections, is there a movement? A movement. Good. It's going to be a long night.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on. So new business, subdivision.
Okay, our first one tonight, we have three tonight. Our first one is preliminary plat for Cheryl Boyd's property. It's on Charlotte Highway, Highway 49 between here and Lake Wylie. The property itself is almost 72 acres total, and she is proposing dividing off a 5-acre portion. The main reason why we need to go for preliminary plat is the parent property has already been divided 6 times. So this is the 7th lot out of the parent parcel. As you see here, the zoning's AGC1. Technically, it's 2 lots. You have the main lot and the new lot. The acreage is overall acreage is 71.61, so the 5 acres will come out of that. I have a little reference for you here. It's that top corner. If you remember in the original picture, that's pasture. That's all it is, it's grass. And go through the findings here. The site will be serviced by private water and septic systems, as indicated on the proposed plat. And because of that, all the lots meet or exceed the 5-acre minimum as stipulated by AGC 1. As proposed land use and density complies with the zoning district, single-family residential is an allowed use. The AGC 1 zoning district has a maximum residential density of 0.4 dwelling units per acre. The development has proposed density of 0.03 dwelling units per acre. And a TIA was not required. Number 4, the development is accessed from Charlotte Highway, which is maintained by SCDOT. The site is bounded on all sides by large lot residential and agricultural parcels, and sidewalks are not required along Charlotte Highway due to the width of the parcels, more than 100 feet. 20% open space is not required due to the zoning district and the proposed density. And all other requirements have been met for the finding number 6. So staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat. I'll go back to, do we have any questions for staff? Yes, sir.
Do you, Marion? So the remainder, if you look over, here's the 5 acres, so the remainder, are there any restrictions along the road based on like minimum length to access the rest of it in that particular AG1, or AGC1, I'm sorry?
For lot width, like along the highway?
Yeah, for lot width along, so to access the rest of the property, yeah.
For lot width, it's 350 feet for minimum lot width on Charlotte Highway. With this one, I don't believe, even with another preliminary plat, they would have the ability to divide out more than 2 more lots,
Okay.
which would require an internal road built to county standards.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions? Is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve the preliminary plat.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? If no discussion, all those in favor? Anyone opposed?
All right, we'll move on to our second preliminary plat for the evening. This is for Gentry Phase 5. It's a revision to the preliminary plat that was approved back in 2018. In this particular instance, the developer removed trees from the buffer and some dedicated tree save areas, which put them under violation for removal of tree save. They had two options to fix this. They could either mitigate the trees that were removed. That would have been about 1,000 inches of trees, 500 trees or so, for about the quarter acre that was removed. Or they could revise the preliminary plat. And because they have enough tree save for the entirety of Gentry outside this phase. So they opted to come in for preliminary plat revision. And here, it's the very end of the peninsula here. The other little sections that are marked in red, we haven't had a final plat yet, so those are all still under the same parcel number. So our mapping system all shows them as one thing so far. But this is it's the tail end here. And this is the original preliminary plat that was approved in 2018. So I stamped out what we're looking at tonight. The zoning is RMX 10 under the Lake Wiley overlay. The lots tonight we're looking at are 24 lots, and the acreage for the entire part there is 14.53 acres. I can go through the findings here. A willingness and capability letter has been provided by York County and accepted by staff. So the second part of the finding does not apply. For finding number 2, single-family residential is an allowed use. RMX 10 has a maximum residential density of 2.5 dwelling units per acre. The overall development, all of Gentry, has a maximum density of 1.36 units per acre. And this is an existing preliminary plat, so a TIA has been completed and approved by staff. So for adequate connectivity and pedestrian facilities, the development is accessed from Valita Road, which is a private road maintained by the overall development Hands Mill on Lake Wiley. The site's bounded on 2 sides by Lake Wiley, and then the outside side by some old residential, I shouldn't say old, original recreation lots. And sidewalks are required and provided. They're all connecting into the rest of the phases. 20% open space has been met through the dedication of 43.46 acres. That's part of the entire Gentry. So they met their open space already outside of this development. In addition, there's a 50-foot buffer provided against the original recreation lots and Lake Wiley. So the other applicable requirements of the chapter, staff has approved a 2-part tree mitigation plan allowing for the replacement of lost trees. Tree placement and type will be addressed in the forthcoming civil plans. Those trees must be in place and healthy before final plat can be approved for this phase. And staff has 2 recommendations for approval. That's going to be on the next slide. So we recommend approval for the preliminary plat. The 2 recommendations are based on the replantings for the areas. We have our landscape architect here tonight if you have specific questions about how they mitigated everything. It is based on code. We have the table references that provide the math for all of it. This is math that I do not do myself. But I imagine I will be out in the field counting trees once all this is done. But, so if you have any specific questions about these recommendations, we do have a staff member here tonight. Do we have any questions for staff?
Hi.
Hi.
TIA was done. When?
2018, before the,
Okay, so we're 5 years down the road. Does the TIA need to be redone?
no, it was already approved. This is actually already part of the approved preliminary plat. We're just having to revise for the tree save areas. The actual lots haven't changed, the density hasn't changed.
Population hasn't changed, road travel through that area hasn't
It's
changed, all
part
that
of
sort of
the,
stuff.
the Lake Wiley, Hands Mill on Lake Wiley development, so it's all internal. And for 24 lots, it's not gonna be a big trigger for a new TIA.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So, I'm sorry, can you explain to me a little bit more? You said that instead of tree save, they were coming in and redoing the plat. What, but isn't it a combination? I mean, what do you mean by instead of? Because then we're looking
Instead of
at,
mitigation. So they would have had to mitigate 1,000 inches of trees, which would be roughly 500 trees, which there's no room for. But since they already have appropriate tree save area for the entire Gentry development part of the Hands Mill, we were able to bring them in as a preliminary plat revision to mitigate the trees under the preliminary plat process instead of the violation process.
As far as from a tree save standpoint, is there a list of large maturing trees that you all have that, and what diameter they're supposed to be at full? Okay. All right.
It'll be me out there with 1, 2, 3.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions?
Yeah, I just have one, Marion. It doesn't go to anything you've discussed, but between lots 51 and 52, there's a small strip that's used to access the marina on that north side. I guess my question would be, where does everybody park for that?
That was under discussion. The marina in that section is for the neighborhood itself. So I imagine most people would be walking to that area or driving golf carts. The parking lot down on the other side of the street is adequate for the parking for both marinas.
All right.
Any additional questions? If no questions, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this preliminary plat with the 2 mitigation points as stated in our information.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on to the next subdivision.
Our final preliminary plat tonight is Aberforth at Allison Creek. The owner is, the applicant is Fiorenza Properties, and the owner is Charlotte AC Holding Company. The property here is again on Charlotte Highway, a little farther up the road from Ms. Boyd's property. It's part of the Big Allison Creek PD. The Westport division is actually just across the creek from it, down on the other side of 49. So it's part of that same PD, the overall one. As you can see here, it is at the intersection of Daimler and 49. It's on the other side there. And the property they are proposing, 155 residential single-family units on an acreage of 95.5 acres. So it's the PD with the development agreement and the Lake Wiley overlay. Here on this, you can see the gray area to the right is the proposed commercial. Is not to be developed at this time, but they were required to reserve commercial space as a part of the development agreement. Go through the findings. Willingness and capability letter has been provided by York County and accepted by staff as of a week and a half ago. And as part of that, part 2 of finding 1 does not apply. Single-family residential is an allowed use within this PD. The PD zoning district doesn't specify a density, but the development agreement itself has a maximum residential density of 3 dwelling units per acre with these particular pods, 7 and 8. The proposed development has a density of 1.63 dwelling units per acre, and the proposed commercial area also meets the minimum requirements of the development agreement for pod 7. Where's that pod 8? The applicant agrees to adequately mitigate the impacts to the transportation network. A TIA has been completed and approved, and a roundabout is required at the intersection of Highway 49. For number 4, development of adequate street connectivity and pedestrian facilities. The development's access from Charlotte Highway, which is maintained by SCDOT. The site is bounding on opposing sides by residential subdivisions and Big Allison Creek itself. And the third side is a large vacant parcel which Wadi Boulevard, the main drive through the development, stubs out to. Sidewalks are required and provided. And the required open space and buffers, 20% open space is required per the development agreement, and it is providing 56.39% open space. A 50-foot buffer against adjoining acreages is required and by the development agreement and is also provided. For finding 6, a tree survey of the required tree save areas has been completed and accepted by staff. So staff recommends approval of Aberforth. And I'll go back to the picture. Do you have any questions for staff?
Yeah. Go back to, so there, there has to be a certain amount of commercial, right, as part of this. That's just the way it is. Is there something where they have to build enough commercial while they're building residential?
No, there is not. It does
Okay.
not have to be at the same time,
Okay,
but they have to reserve the space.
they have to reserve the space. Is there any, moving forward in the future, is there anything like, if they don't have commercial even thought about in years, whatever, I don't know. Do we come back to them and go like, hey, where is this? Because this was supposed to be part of the original plan.
The development agreement doesn't have a timeline like that. The only timelines that we usually come across are for the TIAs and things like that, for build-outs, but for commercial, in the development agreement, it specifies how much, a maximum of, for whatever pod, but it does not give a build-out time.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna come back to TIA again. When was that one done?
That one is fairly recent. I'm not sure exactly the timeline on it, but that one, they are required to put in the roundabout as triggered by this development.
Okay, and in general, if a TIA, like from the previous one, we had 5 years in between, right? So does a TIA have a expiration date period?
Yes.
So in other words, yeah, okay,
And with this one also, Daimler Boulevard is having some development come in also. So there's a bunch of moving pieces for this TIA.
Okay.
And once we have more information and TIAs for different developments, that's when things really start popping.
okay.
So-
But what I'm saying as a general rule, if a TIA is approved in 2018, and I don't get around to doing anything until 2030, my TIA is still good, 12 years went by, or is there some, when does it actually go bad that I have to go get a new one, right?
Your preliminary plat is vested for 2 years, and you have to get a construction permit within those 2 years in order to have your preliminary plat extended. If your construction permit, if you do not move on it or have any good faith movement on it, it expires. Therefore, your preliminary plat expires, so you start over. That's a new TIA.
And so if I could keep doing that every 2 years, I could be making little bits of progress, but then could have a significant impact down the road. So there are some things you have to be careful of with these, right? That it could,
Yeah, we have a way to revest their preliminary plats. Usually, I think we can do it twice, so it'd be a total of 4 years.
okay.
But after that, if it takes that long.
And the reason I'm asking that is the other item that you mentioned was the difference in density of what they're doing versus what's permitted. So what I'm trying to get my little brain wrapped around is, okay, well, I have a TIA based on this plat stuff, and all that was good, and then I decide I'm gonna increase my density. I'm not saying this particular individual would, right, but in a bigger scope of things, then the density goes up. Well, now my TIA is not good anymore, so does that automatically trigger another TIA when that happens, even though they're permitted under this, right? And I know we've got a PD and we have a lot of things around this particular example, so I'm
Right.
taking you off in the weeds a little bit, and I
Okay.
apologize. I'm just trying to make sure I understand how this works, that there could be a circumstance where something got approved in a preliminary plat, the density was at less than what they were allowed, but they decide later to go more dense, and do they need to get permission to go more dense?
Y'all have to approve it. That's a
Okay.
revision to the preliminary plat.
So then, because of that revision, it could trigger another TIA because, okay, now your density's gone up by 30%, so,
Yeah, 30% would definitely trigger it.
okay.
If it
all right.
were, it depends on the project. You know, if they added 4 more lots to this one, it might not require a new TIA. But if it were 30%, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I did have a question about the roundabout, because that obviously has been a result of the traffic study. That roundabout is now going to be at the end of Daimler with a new high school going in. Has that been considered in this TIA? And that's question one. And question two is, does SCDOT have to approve the design, or has it already been approved?
It has already been approved. This is SCDOT's idea.
Okay,
And it's their maintenance, so we don't really have a lot of say in it.
okay.
But we haven't gotten a TIA for the school yet. So things can change.
Thank you.
Got a couple quick questions. On the graphic you've got here, very far left-hand, I see that there's a kind of a stub out with a cul-de-sac sitting right in the undisturbed buffer.
Yes.
Is there a, what's the property on the other side of that?
Let me see if there are. It's largely vacant. It's a large piece of property. I believe there is a home kind of at the top side. There's a little clearing area up here,
Okay.
but it's about 100 acres, if I
Okay.
believe
I just
right.
didn't know if that was planning for additional development traffic that would flow through this development
Yeah.
to 49?
Yeah, it's a requirement for, per code for interconnectivity for future.
Okay. Which still makes me question why the DOT went with a roundabout on 49 with increasing traffic.
If you call me tomorrow, I can give you a phone number.
Just curious. Still curious, I mean, yeah, but I also know drivers in this area. Packet page 34,
Oh, goodness.
that's the little piece of development on the other side of 49?
Uh-huh, Avonlea.
Is that tied to this, or is it separate?
The TIA is tied to it. The
Okay.
TIA itself was for both. It did not separate them out.
Okay.
So it is tied to that. They did not make the deadline to make it onto tonight's agenda. They'll be here in October.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out how they were how they were related.
Same developer.
Gotcha.
Any additional questions? If there are no additional questions, is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second that.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Moving on to rezoning 23-36.
Good evening, everybody. Our first case here is case 2336 on Flint Hill Road in Fort Mill. Its tax map number is 726-0000037. The request is to rezone a 5.63 acre parcel from UD to LI. And the purpose here this evening is to locate a trucking operation and a boat and RV storage on this site. As you can see in the map here, the property is located on the east side of 77 off of Flint Hill Road, just also east of 21. Aerial for the area here is showing development to the south is residential. There are some mostly single-family homes as well as some apartments. But this little wedge here between 51 and Flint Hill Road is mostly industrial, light industrial products. This area here. Zooming in here, you can see the property. While it's showing here as being treed, it's currently been cleared. This above that is also a concrete plant, and below that is a waste management facility. Property is relatively flat with no environmental features. Zoning for the area here is, as you can see, this gray area is UD, so the prominent area for this zoning for this area here. Those couple of purple sites just to the north of that, if you can remember for a couple months ago, those came in recently for some rezonings also for a trucking operation. So it's a very common use in this area here, given the location to 77. Comprehensive plan for the area here is artisan employment. And that is where you can have goods and services to fulfill the needs of the local community. Located typically near other light industrial products. Access to I-77 is very important here. You can have a variety of uses considering cabinet makers, vehicle and boat service and repair, obviously, and trucking operations, and boat and RV storage as well. Staff is recommending approval for this request here. It aligns with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. There are similar uses in the general vicinity. I-77 is nearby, and this also removes one more UD parcel from our zoning code. Any questions for staff?
So this is similar to one we looked at about 3 months ago, where they
Yes.
had cleared, and I think I might have asked the question, but I just wanted to make sure I asked it again. So they had cleared up by the road, and then, of course, you got homes that are along the road right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that gonna, what's the tree?
They left an extensive buffer. They cleared behind the buffer, so they kept that clearing
Okay.
beyond the buffer that's required.
So that'll be evaluated for making sure that, right?
Sure, when it comes in for site plan approval or review, they'll evaluate the buffer and see whether it meets the code. If not, they'll have to replant some additional plantings, but they've
Okay.
kept a pretty good, significant buffer there.
Okay, thanks.
This may sound like a strange question, but it seems, again, like, you know, 2 times now on this road with 2 trucking operations, we've had these folks just come in and feel like they can do anything they want without any sort of oversight or following the rules, or, I mean, are they related?
No, they're not. They are different from the previous one. Maybe they saw somebody else doing something and thought it was okay and did it themselves. I can't answer to why they did what they did, but, you know, fortunately, we caught them and had to come back in and get the property rezoned. And they have made some improvements to the site. It still needs some, and they have gone through 1 round of approvals for their site plan, and so they are making movement toward becoming in compliance.
Diana, it looks like they have 1 access point off.
Yes, that's all they'll need, just one
That's all they
access
need?
point.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were considering actually sharing an access point with the concrete plant, but we're not going to. I don't think we're going to allow that because it really needs to line up with the neighborhood further south.
Okay,
So I think the separation is not going to require that, or not going to make that requirement. So we're still looking at the actual site, but they're going to have just one access point.
okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? If there are no additional questions, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there any more discussion? Okay, if there's no discussion, all those in favor? And anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.
The next case is 2337 on Lawrence Road in Clover. Its tax map number is 282000013. This request is to rezone a 5.71 acre parcel from AGC to RUD. And the purpose here is to be able to create a new parcel in order to construct one more single-family home. Located on Lawrence Road, which is just south of the town of Clover, north of the town of York. As you can see for the area, there's a combination of very large lot, some agricultural lots over here, but there's also a large subdivision just south of that. Sanders Landing, I think it is. Zooming into the property itself, you can see the existing single-family home, a variety of outbuildings. The applicant had hoped to be able to cut the property right here for a 1 acre parcel, but that's not going to work. She'll be cutting a part back towards the back, putting the 1 acre back here, and then having a driveway coming through the property to access onto Lawrence Road. Relatively flat with no environmental features. Zoning for the area, the majority of the property in this area here is AGC, but there is a lot of RUD on the south side of Lawrence Road, as well as also some on the north side. The comprehensive plan for the area here is agricultural to the north and residential to the south. As you know, agricultural land uses is for farmlands and timberlands for very low density neighborhoods. You can't have some cottage industries and things that support agricultural uses. We are recommending approval for this request here. Typical of these AGC to RUD changes, they're not taking away a property currently being used for agricultural. There's already in the area, as well as lots of a similar size. And RUD is allowed on the south side of Lawrence. Any questions for staff?
Diane, can you take it back to the aerial view? Is
Just
that
the
the-
house, or?
Yeah, no, that's good right there. So where are you saying they're proposing the drive?
There, it looks like there's like an old farm road maybe along through here. You know, that's one thing they could use. They don't have to, but they will then access Lawrence Road through this property here. And so they'll subdivide in the back, and either this one or this one is what they'll have to use.
I was gonna say there, yeah. He was asking about a right-of-way through there or easement or
Sure,
whatever.
so there's a requirement to be able to allow you to have that property behind you. I believe it has to be 25 feet wide. And we do a lot of requirements in terms of having a recorded agreement with the county for maintenance requirements. And so making sure if anything happens, they're both going to maintain that road. So we've added some provisions to the code to allow that to happen.
What? So that's if, like, one of these is sold,
Exactly,
yeah,
yes.
it's a different owner, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
That safeguards the county and the property owners.
Any questions? If no questions, is there a motion? I'll
No.
make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed?
Can we discuss that later?
I'm sorry it's been a night. Okay, let's back up. I make a motion
It's okay.
to approve. Is there any discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, I think we're good.
All right.
Moving on to the tracking sheet. Any questions or concerns? Nope. Any discussion? No, wait, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All those in favor? And there's no discussion. See you next month.